Cool. Are you good to go?
Good to go.
Great.
Let's do it.
So, Josh, thanks so much for doing this interview. Really appreciate it, mate. And as you know, this has been recorded partly for our YouTube channel, but also for our new online course, Control Alt Delete. And the video that people are watching in the course is all about how porn industry is a bit of a hustler. So we'll be talking a little bit about that in this interview. But before we jump in, just tell people a little bit about yourself, where you live, you know, married, although, you know, tell us about yourself, mate.
For sure. Well, first, it's good to be with you, Ian. I love talking about this stuff and everything that you're doing. I'm based in Bath, live in Bath, and that is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I have a upbringing which was pretty nomadic, so we moved around. I think when I was 15, I'd been at 13 schools at 15, so we moved around tons. Wow. And then I went to Canada at 18, where I met my wife. We were married 9 years this year, and we've just had a little baby girl. So I've just crossed the threshold into fatherhood, which is incredible and daunting and everything in between. Yeah. And I'm a poet, man. I always tell people I work with words and I work with people. That's what I do. And the two are very entwined for me. I believe life and death is in the power of the tongue. I believe that our words matter. And I love making worlds with words, whether it's writing songs or poems or sermons. I love working with words, and I love the way words impact people. And the words I write, the poems that I write, the songs I write are deeply informed by my experiences and the stories and experiences of others. So my life is really this kind of marrying of how can I impact people and help people, and how can I be as creative as possible with the words that I have. And I love it. And I pinch myself every day that I get to do it. I tell people that I have a job and I have work, right? My work is as a poet, and sometimes it's my job and sometimes it's not, you know, but it's my work. Whether or not I get paid for it, this is what I do. This is what I'm here for. And grateful to be doing it, man.
And it's really your poetry that connected us as Naked Truth. And in 2018, mate, can you believe that?
Wow.
So 2 years ago.
No way.
Yeah, you wrote a piece and we did a kind of collaboration project together. And we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at that poem and talking about that and that experience that, as you say, you know, you write out your own experiences, that experience that poem was kind of based on, I guess. If people haven't seen or heard the poem and the film that goes with the poem, you can see it on the YouTube channel, or you can go to howgoodisporn.com, and there's a website that's kind of dedicated to the film, and the lyrics are on there, and there's a load of other helpful stuff on there as well. I mean, you've kind of wrote the poem. I remember the first time you kind of did a rough draft and you kind of sent it over to me, and you kind of said, look, I'd love to do something around this issue of pornography, and so I've written this. And I listened to it, and I don't know what I was expecting. You know, I don't know whether I'd already gone through my head, you know, what words rhyme with porn? How's it, you know, I don't know what I thought you were going to come up with, but you know what I listened to, and this is honestly true. I remember listening to it, and you'd kind of put a little bit of a kind of backing track to it, because the poem has like this track to it as well. I remember listening to it, and you've written it like a breakup letter, haven't you? Really? And it's full of, I guess, like any breakup would be. It's full of regret, and there's bits of anger, and also there's kind of hope for a future. And it's like this person who knows they've been in this toxic relationship and they're trying to get out of it. And I remember listening to it and just thinking, man, this is so good, but also welling up a bit. I mean, there's a point in it which we'll mention towards the end, where you kind of start to paint a picture of the future, and And I remember I'm just like, I'm literally, I'm doing the whole, if I had mascara, I'd be trying to stop it from running moment. So, I mean, yeah, it's a great piece. And I'm so grateful that you kind of gave it to us as an organization to help us raise awareness around the issue and help others. But you start with these words. It says, simply, you start by saying, I remember when I first met you. I'm not even going to lie to you. The moment I laid eyes on you, I was hypnotized by you, right? That's how it starts. So I wanted to ask you, how did it start? I mean, you say you remember that moment when you first met pornography, if you like. Tell us your story. Tell us how it all started for you.
Wow. Yeah. Well, good question. I was probably, I think, 11 years old, maybe 12, I think 11, and at my friend's house. And, we were on MSN Messenger. That was back in the day, MSN Messenger. And we found this folder on the desktop of his dad's computer. And we just clicked it. And in there was it was just JPEGs and JPEGs and JPEGs of just pornographic images.
And what was it labeled as, this folder? I'm doubting it. I doubt it was kind of like, something blue for the dads. So, I mean, what was that labeled as?
That's such a good question. I wish I could remember now.
Under the mattress.
I mean, you could at least put it somewhere other than your desktop, right? At least put it in your documents. But we just opened up, and it was, for both of us, I remember we were like, hypnotized is the best word I could find to use it. When I wrote the poem, there's nothing in that poem that I felt like, I want to use this because it rhymes well. Every word in that poem is specifically there to describe and epitomize that experience. And it was hypnotic. It was like we were looking at something and nothing else existed now. Like we were transported into this new world. We'd uncovered this treasure chest, and it just, I think about that moment just totally redefined my childhood. Like from that moment. And I remember we looked at each other with this sense of awe and guilt, this sense of, this is incredible, and should we be here? What is this? And it just led to years of, a relationship with porn. But that's how it began. Yeah. Stumbling across a folder.
And you say, again, you sort of talk about, and we'll speak more into this in a minute, but another line is, you told me you were tender, but I knew you had a venomous touch, which I love that line.
Yeah.
How did you discover that then? How did porn become poisonous? After that kind of first moment of and hypnotism, when did you start noticing the poison?
Yeah, I remember moving up to secondary school, and what is it? It's like you finish primary school in July, you start secondary school in September. So what's that, 2 months? But it's as if the whole world changes in those 2 months. So the kid you were in July is transformed into this new person in September. I remember walking onto those grounds and feeling like I've got to be bigger. I've just got to be bigger. I've got to bring more to it. And I remember the fashion changed in 2 months. The girls just wore different things. So did the boys. It just evolved. And I had found porn between that summer, right? And I remember looking and realizing that I no longer saw my classmates, the girls around me, in the way that I did throughout primary school. And that those images I'd seen that summer, and the other stuff that I had found, had changed the lens in which I saw women. I wouldn't have described it like this at the time. I was a preteen, whatever. But when I look back, I knew it at that point. I knew that my filter had changed, and I knew that it wasn't a change that was going to create, more beauty and more, connection between me and the girls. It was going to create something that felt, at least at the time, like something I might not be able to control. And I think that's what felt really scary, was suddenly there's thoughts in my mind that weren't there before, and I don't know how to make them stop. And yet I keep going back, you know? So that's where I realized, oh, this isn't just tender. This is danger as well.
And I mean, I guess for loads of people, men and women who have kind of been exposed to porn as a young kid, 11, 12, whatever. And then it gets sort of hidden away. You kind of keep going back, like you say, but no one knows. And it escalates a little bit as well. I mean, how long did that last for you? And obviously, I mean, you use lines about kind of being bent double, beaten and bleeding out. You use the phrase that is the title of the poem of being vacant. That feels like it became more serious than a teenage boy who's a bit curious, checking out some stuff every now and then. You know, how serious did it become for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably throughout my teens I don't know, daily, at least, daily occurrence of, and it would, it was different forms of porn. Like it was at that time, I think for a while, you're just still exploring. Like the internet is this landscape, this unbelievable terrain, and you're in your little patch and you're kind of looking at what's there. And then suddenly you go into this next field and you see there's so much more there, and you stay there for a while. And so it got more and more probably as I discovered, as the compass kind of took me to different places. So I would say right up until, 18, 19, right into the end of my teens, it was something that I didn't really feel I had a grip on, like I was in the driver's seat with, but something I was being driven by. And the poem was an incredibly emotional experience for me, because I was giving language to this teenager's experience who couldn't articulate it at the time, who was so in it, like if you imagine, have you seen Band of Brothers? Yeah. Or for anyone watching, any kind of war film, if you imagine like the soldiers in the trenches and someone saying, hey, how is it going? How would you describe this experience? They're just going to be like, what are you talking? Like, I don't have time to think about what this is. But then, you watch Band of Brothers, and the last episode is the actual men, these old men that served in the war. And you think you've had all this time to digest the experience, and now you can articulate it. That's what that poem was for me. It was me articulating the experience of this young man, just feeling out of control. And it gave me so much sympathy for my younger self. And it also gave me the words that I would love to articulate to people in that position, in that age, in that bracket.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you talk about that kind of the hindsight, I guess, and the ability to look back and see what it was that was really going on, and which you were blinded to at the time because of all sorts of stuff, hormones and all sorts of stuff going on, but actually also an intention by, I would argue, the porn industry to misdirect and manipulate and lie to us, and in control of our course, as I said earlier. The module that we're looking at is this idea that porn industry, not the people in the films, not the actors, not the performers, but the industry actually is intentionally seeking to profit from exploiting people on both sides of the screen. The consumer and leveraging weakness and maybe age or all sorts of things, and actually exploiting, of course, we know, people in the films and in the pictures and all the stuff as well. So would you agree? I felt like when you were writing the poem, one of the things that came over is this sense of almost bait and switch, like I got conned, and now I'm looking back going, how did that happen? What you're like, if you have been conned or robbed by someone, I think you kind of go, how could I have been so stupid almost, to allow that to happen? Do you think there's some of that regret?
Yeah, I mean, if I think back to, absolutely. When I think back to being a young kid, right, there's a reason the Marvel films are the biggest selling films when they come out. Because when you see a superhero, it doesn't matter if you're sat there, this skinny little boy, you identify, it's transcendent. You become the superhero. You feel powerful. And so that's why we dress up in superhero outfits. That's why we put on the football t-shirts with the player's name on the back. You know, we identify as them, and it somehow like is transcendent of who we are in a moment and our limitations. And for a young boy who feels out of his depth already, who's at secondary school, who feels small, who doesn't feel big enough, who doesn't feel talented enough, who doesn't know where his life's going to go. When you watch porn, the same thing happens. You identify with this feeling of being powerful or being in control, and sexuality in itself. And I know this is something that you guys do so well to speak to and educate, but it's a minefield in itself of like, what does it mean to just to have a healthy sexual appetite and to understand your own sexuality. And I wasn't educated about that. So when I saw porn, I saw this image of what it could look like to feel powerful. And porn sold me that, you know. The problem was it was pseudo power, and it was power at the expense of someone else. I didn't realize that ultimately it was me, you know, and it was teaching me a false sense of power, which ultimately, delivered the deepest sense of weakness. And in the poem, I talk about this idea of vacant, because I remember writing that line, Ian, and like having a moment, because I felt like I had found the exact words that described my relationship with porn, like a house that no one lives in, you know?
Yeah.
It gets me emotional talking about it right now. Like like, you know, this sense of being vacant, you know, the sense that, oh, no, I'm not filled with power and dignity and authority. I'm filled with this sense of longing and despair. And so
emptiness,
porn throughout my relationship with porn sold me the idea of power and strength, as if that was ever going to be the most fulfilling thing to experience anyway. Of course, as I've grown up as a man, I realized, you know, Josh, it's not about being powerful. You know, that's never going to deliver the fulfillment you're after. But I was definitely sold that by porn. The porn I watched, the man, you know, was always the dominating kind of more superior presence in the film. And so I began to identify with that pseudo sense of power. And again, that of course deeply impacted my relationship with women, because I would just organically think, well, I'm the more powerful one in this situation. And you can just, you know, well, there's so many issues that come with that.
Yeah, and we'll chat a bit about that later, because I think that's something that you try to reflect in the film as well, some of those emotions. But there's a line where you talk about how porn is fashioned in the shadows, and that so much of its power is in the darkness and the secrecy, as well as the shame. As well, it's not its power; it's you know, the brokenness is often in shadow and hidden as well. When did that change for you? When did it stop being something that was in the shadows? When did you first tell someone or start talking to someone, and what was that like for you?
It wasn't until I was 18, and I'm so encouraged by the thought of younger men and women, you know, doing it from such a younger age, telling someone. Because if I could just say one thing, it's just that. Tell someone, you know, that's what changes everything. So I was 18, and group of four friends, and we did what we call walking in the light, you know. It's a bit of a corny phrase for just what's hidden in your life. And it was something that I wasn't really kind of a concept that I was introduced to at 18 is, you know, I was like, okay, so there's this idea that the things that grow in the dark are like, is mold. you know, there's not a whole lot of great things that grow in the dark. So if there's something in my life, whatever it is, and it's in the dark, and to define that it's something that out of a feeling of shame, I haven't told anyone. You know, it's different to being private or having something that is personal to you. It's something that is because of shame, I don't want to be exposed. So I did it. And suddenly it was like a grip of such power became loose and looser and looser and looser until it was just like an open palm. And it just blew me away that I had been gripped by this feeling of shame and this feeling of being hidden, and all I needed to do was tell someone. And to this day, I'm 30 years old now, and it's still the exact same process, of being honest and telling someone. And the thing about,
you certainly have told someone, mate, because you've written, a poem about it, and it's kind of gone around the world. So I think you've definitely done the telling someone now. But that first time must have been intense, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it was very intense. I was very nervous, and I don't know. It wasn't even the feeling of like, oh, I'm going to say something and you won't believe it, because I'm aware other people watch porn. It was a sense of, I'm going to have to admit that I'm not the person I describe myself to be.
Yeah.
So someone once said to me, Josh, who you are when no one's watching, that's who you really are. And that is
interesting.
Like, that's really powerful. Who you are when no one's watching, that's you. So if you want to bring people to who you really are, tell them what you do when no one's watching, and then it's really freeing, because then you're actually like, oh, I'm not, you know me, you actually know me. And just to, I'll stop talking a second. And there's something about the human like innate human desire to not be lonely, and to run away from our loneliness. And I think the fear of loneliness for me is what drove me to porn. And still, that's where the temptation is there for me today. Is the feeling of instantaneous connection. So to bring someone into your loneliness, it's the advanced player move. Like, you suddenly realize, oh, I just got what I was running away from, which is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a bit about that. You again in the poem, I'm just quoting these lines back at you. I mean, like, don't know them, but you talk about
it's good. It's helpful.
That there's a reality that crucified your fantasy. So for you, and that reality might be different for different people, but for you, what was the reality that ultimately has crucified the fantasy? Tell us a bit about that for you, what you think that looks like, that reality.
Yeah, so actually when I was 18, I met the woman who's now my wife, and it just kind of began to make sense to me, this thing of like, these two things, if they coexist together, it's going to be harmful. If my relationship with porn and my relationship with my wife happening at the same time, someone's going to get hurt. And one of them is digital and one of them is human. So I know who that's going to be. And so it was the realization that a fantasy, a term I use for it sometimes, is fantasy is the land where nothing grows. It's just, there's no investment there. It's just this dry and desolate ground. But reality, the relationship I'm in, well, that's where something grows. And for something to grow, it takes work, and it's not always pretty, but you get your hands in the soil and the dirt, and actually something comes of it. And it's still there for me today, that attention of, Josh, what will you choose? Will you choose the fantasy? Will you choose the real in your mind of what you could be? When you imagine yourself as this man, it's like imagining yourself absolutely ripped, but never going to the gym. And it's like, are you going to do that? Or to use those terms, or are you just going to forget that image and, hey, just go out for a run, and choose a reality to deny the fantasy. And this sounds a bit bizarre, but I heard about the life of a salmon, which most people know, but it just clicked something in me. Salmon are born, they swim downstream, then they exist in riverbeds. Then at some point in their life, they swim back upstream, and they go upstream until they find another sort of riverbed, and they give birth to the next generation, and they die. So they spend most of their life going upstream. And I think there's more to us as humans like that than we realize, where what we really want, the real fulfillment, comes from going against those just instant gratification desires that we have. It's going against it. And that's where the beauty is. That's where the real stuff is.